college, I had to read this book, The Ghost in the Machine I still remember the author, Alfred Kessler. And I have no idea what that book was about, but whenever technology doesn't work, it's the ghost in the machine. Makes perfect sense to me. So anyway, I watched this Netflix show called The Pale Blue Eye. Anybody else watch it? So it's a fictional murder mystery involving a very creepy cadet named Edgar Allan Poe that is situated at the military academy at West Point. And the show is just basically fun to watch. But it really wasn't the story that impressed me, and I'm almost embarrassed to say this. I learned something from the set. And while I always intellectually knew that things were really, really dark prior to the advent of electricity, I never really thought about what pre-electrical darkness might have looked like for the people who lived at the time. And this movie did its best to convey this omnipresent darkness. So the tavern is dark and smoky and shadowy. And the dining room of the Great Hall has these huge chandeliers with curtains, and there are just candles, and there are candles just all over. But even despite that, you could see the shadows in the corners of the room. So I was thinking, imagine the great estates like Downton Abbey. Imagine when you gave a big party, there had to be thousands of candles all over in every single room of the house. And then I was thinking, with my family background, I'd be working in the kitchen. So imagine what it would be like cooking for huge numbers of people by candlelight. So light has always been important to people who essentially lived half their lives in a very dark world.
Seems like we're frozen again.
About you, but I rejoice in every single minute of light, which are few and far between in January. And for those of you who've known me for a long time, this is the part of the year where I start adding up the minutes of lights that we've accumulated, which are few and far between in January. So meanwhile, we've only gained 2 minutes of light in January in the morning, but we've gained 28 minutes of light in the afternoon. Since the winter solstice. So in our gospel today, we see how Jesus recognized and valued light. In Matthew 15, he asked, who would ever hide your candle under a bushel? Because you need that candle to light up the whole house. John's gospel said that the light of Jesus shone in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. And of course, Jesus is the light of the world. And when you think about it, there was a reason why the ancients worshiped the sun and the moon. So the opposite of light is, of course, darkness, which this particular TV show uses quite handily to demonstrate how the ambient darkness mirrors the darkness of some human hearts, where the light can never dispel or penetrate. Novelist Joseph Conrad called this darkness the heart of darkness. If you've ever read that book or seen Apocalypse Now, you know what they were talking about. So anyway, quite a few of us have probably taken down your Christmas trees and our decorations. And even so, throughout the season of the Epiphany, we continue to celebrate the return of light, both literally and figuratively. In the Catholic tradition, as Stan mentioned today, we return to ordinary time after January 6th, and we make a mad turn from Jesus as this cute little baby to a grown-up, as if nothing happened in between. But if you check out the Protestants, this liturgical time is anything but ordinary. They count down the Sundays until Lent as Sundays after the Epiphany in order to preserve that afterglow of Christmas. So if you think about it, the afterglow is probably the most important part of the light, because without it, the great movements founded by great people will eventually die out. So the lighted torch needs a bearer and essentially must be handed on to others who are willing to receive it and pass it on. So history, too often, sadly, is the history of torchbearers like Jesus and the late Dr. Martin Luther King, in whose footsteps Martin walked even unto his death. And we need heroes, in spite of what Tina Turner sang in her song, "We Don't Need Another Hero." But we can't be blinded by the light of those bright candles that stream across the inky darkness like comets and then blow up like firecrackers. We need those who catch the light and continue to light up the darkness around them, like John Lewis and Bayard Ruskin and Fannie Lou Hamer. And we also need people just like us who hold on to our candles in spite of the wind that buffets us from all sides. Believe it or not, that candle actually has a name, and that name is hope. And hope comes in a variety of different flavors and a taste that might change according to the circumstances that might be beyond our control. If you think about it, more often than not, hope takes a different pathway from the one we might have eventually prayed for. I know I used to say to my fellow members of the Women's Ordination Conference, if we, whoever that might be, if we build it, they, whoever they are, they will come. And of course, people did come, which is why you are all here today. But what I found out over the course of the last 15 or 16 years is that Reform-minded Catholics really didn't want a community outside of the institution. They wanted women to slip right into the roles played by male priests. And to do that, women would have to buy into the power structures of clerical supremacy and take a vow of obedience to a mere man who has the title of bishop. So if that happened, nothing would be transformed because the structures would not be changed. And so we in the community of St. Mary Magdalene, we happily function on our own with maybe a tangential relationship with the institutional church. And so we've grown organically and become who we are today, rather than being stifled by any kind of institutional control. But of course, the lack of change that comes with the hope deferred is really hard to manage and swallow. And so I personally know quite a few disaffected Catholics who either no longer attend church or who have switched to other denominations. And David Eckhart, who was the former pastor of this church, he commented to me once that most of his congregation was made up of former Catholics. And I know my classmates at the seminary who were Lutheran or who became Lutheran or Episcopal priests and ministers have said the same thing. And likewise, many of our once Catholic African-American sisters and brothers attend evangelical or non-denominational churches where the leaders look like them and where the history of the churches is less painful, and in places where they are honored and respected. And when you think about it, our organization, Roman Catholic Women Priests, is composed largely of white women. So why would a woman of color choose to become a member of Roman Catholic Women Priests, which would mean that she would always live on the edge of her professional life? Why would she do that when she could be a leader of substance in the Black church and actually make a salary that she could live on? Why would people of color even choose to join us or worship with us, even though we're Catholic with a small c? Why would they come here when the Catholic Church in Philadelphia is the history of racism, where the Archdiocese has closed down all of the traditionally Black schools and churches and rebuilt itself as a wealthy suburban archdiocese? So the good news, in spite of all this, there's always good news. And to use a cliche that my editor, Ellie Hardy, would frown upon, whenever I send her something for her to check, she'll write in big letters, "Cliche." So I know I have to change it. Hope does spring eternal, and things will always change in the future as they have always changed in the past, as long as we hold on to our candles, our lighted candles. Because we know that the divine is never constrained by doors or walls erected by any human being, however exalted their position. The light of God will always reach into the corners and it will shine even in the most unusual and unorthodox places without any kind of human permission or direction, because no one puts Jesus, the light of the world, under a bushel or squirrels away divine light for personal use, just for personal use or for distribution. As the book of Exodus says, God will be whatever God chooses to be, and God will inspire us to be whoever we need to be in order to pass on that light of God to the next set of torchbearers and create a movement that we may not know what that outcome will be. So anyway, I take yoga at the Y 2 days a week, and I have this wonderful teacher named Kathy. And at the end of the class, after we've twisted our bodies into the most outrageous positions, I must say, we sit quietly on the mat, and she tells us to put our hands in the prayer position and lift up our hearts. And she says, the light within me salutes and recognizes the light within you. And she bows and she says, Namaste. So let us all put our hands in the prayer position. And let us lift up our hearts to our hands. The light within me recognizes and salutes the light within you. Namaste.
Namaste.